Welcome back to the Voices of Women's Summit in honor of International Women's Day 2024. Your host for this session is Diane Alexander, the Confidence Catalyst. Diane plays alchemy crystal singing bowls, and her Yorkie, Tinkerbell, won 8 National Agility Obstacle Course Championships. She has another amazing guest coming right up. Take it away, Diane.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy International Women's Day. Are you feeling the energy? It's incredible. This event's up-leveling us all and rippling out there into the world. So get the most from this. Take notes, ask questions of our beautiful expert, and in the chat will be good, and invite friends. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Cherri Jacobs Pruitt. And she'll be speaking on dismantling domination and building a partnership world. And she is the producer of the Power of Partnership podcast. Welcome, Cherri.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's really a pleasure and honor to be taking part in this exciting day in honor of International Women's Day.
It truly is. I think we all would love to know, how did you get so passionate? How did you get into this?
Yeah. Well, I first learned about what's called the Domination Partnership Continuum, and we'll dig into that quite a bit more, in 2007, when I heard a woman named Riane Eisler being interviewed on National Public Radio. And she was being interviewed about a book that she had just published called The Real Wealth of Nations. And I was just blown away. I was just, oh my goodness, this is the solution to all of our world's problems. And it's so easy. We just need to care for each other. And, such an easy concept that we as humans have succeeded in making super, super difficult. So I heard the interview. I dug into, obviously I read The Real Wealth of Nations, as well as, her most famous book, The Chalice and the Blade, and many, many others. I took some courses and trainings through Riane's Center for Partnership Systems. And then in late 2022, I reached out to Riane and the Center for Partnership Systems team to see if I could do a podcast. I was really curious how people around the world were living and implementing partnership-based principles and paradigms, and I figured that probably a lot of other people were equally curious, and a podcast seemed like a super fun way to do this. So I kicked off the podcast, and I guess before we move on, I'd love to hear from our audience, a call out to podcasters. Do we have other podcasters who are listening? And feel free to chat yes in the chat box and share the names of your podcast for all of us. So yeah, that's how I got started. That's what's bringing me here today, to talk more about it with you.
That is absolutely fascinating. And in your different podcasting, you must get so many different inputs on this whole idea of partnership. Are some people really, really surprised at how simple it is and how well that it works? Or have you noticed changes? Or what are some of the big pieces that come up that you find that when you bring this idea, they go, oh, should have had a V8,
Yeah, it's really, the podcast, as most of you know, there's not a lot of interaction with the audio podcast. Now, we are going to start releasing video podcasts, and then through YouTube, we'll be able to have a little bit more of that give and take. So for right now, we don't hear a lot back from people in terms of how they're using the content of the podcast to really make changes. But the real emphasis of the podcast is helping people understand, what do we mean by this domination partnership continuum? So I want to talk just a touch about that with folks, and give just a super high level, because I know this is a very short interview. And yeah, exactly. So very much condensing down, Riane Eisler, she's a social system scientist, a cultural historian, a futurist, she's an attorney, and she's really devoted her whole life and she's now in her 90s, so she's devoted many, many decades of answering the question of why, when we humans have such an enormous capacity for caring, for sensitivity, for creativity, why do we treat each other with such violence, insensitivity, and destructiveness? And in the chat, put a yes, if you've asked yourself that same question. And so what she did is she did extensive research over many decades, and she found that we really have that there's patterns that repeat themselves across cultures, across all cultures, and across all time, across millennials. And what she found from these patterns that she was seeing is that there's really two major configurations, and they really can be viewed as falling along a continuum. So at one end of the continuum is what she called the domination system, and at the other end of the continuum is what she called the partnership continuum. And then what she further found and documented in all of her research is that the degree to which a society is orienting on that domination partnership continuum is really going to affect all aspects of life that make up society. So the family, gender, economics, and the narratives and stories. So if a society or a family, is oriented strongly on the domination end of that continuum, you're going to see authoritarian and inequitable social and economic structures. So there's rigid hierarchies. Control is maintained by fear and violence. So there's a lot of, power over, not power with, a lot of scarcity mindset. So someone has to win, someone has to lose. Essentially, you're either serving or being served. And then, of course, the partnership is what it sounds like. It's the exact opposite. So equity and diversity are celebrated and valued. There's high degrees of mutual respect. There's trust. So there's hierarchies, but they're hierarchies of actualization, not power. And of course, this is, the degree that a society or a family or an individual orient on that continuum is going to fluctuate. It's not ever completely in the domination end, completely in the partnership end. So it's always a matter of degrees. So, just to kind of wrap up that kind of high level concept, Riane Eisler has written numerous books about how that plays out, how the domination partnership continuum plays out in all aspects of our world, in our interpersonal dynamics, in economics, in healthcare, in education. So that's what the real point of the podcast, it's highlighting those stories of how people are already living in partnership, and what that looks like across all sorts of areas. And how to really...
I'd love to point out to the audience that they might not know. If you didn't read her bio, go ahead and do that. Her background is enormous in terms of local, county, state, and federal levels, working with maternal and child health policies and systems work, master's degree in public administration, advocate for all of this transformational work for such a long time. She's such a pioneer in it and such a wonderful spokesperson. The things that you're saying apply to me in my own life and in my own work, but it's so much more far-reaching. What you're speaking about, it really is a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah, it's a huge paradigm shift, and I like to look at it as it's almost the missing link paradigm shift. We keep trying to address all of our societal problems that, unfortunately seem to be getting more challenging. We definitely, if you look at history and if you dig into history, which we don't have time to do right now, but it is fascinating, you'll see that throughout history, there's periods where we really do have a regression back to the domination end of the continuum, and we clearly are in one of those periods right now. Now, the positive news is that these periods of regression into domination are almost always followed by huge bursts of creativity and connectedness and relationship building and positivity. So we do have things to look forward to, but it won't come automatically. We have to make that cultural transformation happen together. And when we do that, then it starts from within, our changing our own story, which is why the name of the talk today. It's changing our collective story in order to change our own story.
So
or the other way
if
around.
someone is, oh, I'm sorry. When someone is new to this topic, what would you recommend, or some of the places that you find they're most not aware of, that they're surprised about? When, oh, I didn't know I thought that. I didn't know that was operating in my life. Really? That makes a big difference. Do you have a couple of those that are like these that people notice? Because I notice sometimes when I meet somebody like you, I didn't realize I thought that. If you had a few
Yeah,
of those.
yeah. I think they're all over. I think maybe one of the most one of the most helpful areas to identify where that domination paradigm is seeping in and impacting our lives is in your family. So as a parent, are were you raised in a home, for instance, where you know you are following rules no matter what? What usually it's dad, but sometimes mom too. But what your parents say is what they say, and you follow their rules no matter what. And and then is that happening in your job? Are you attracted to jobs where you have a supervisor that is very paternalistic and making sure that you're following the rules no matter what, or it's a very rigid structure that you're working in? And then are you finding yourself feeling dissatisfied and feeling that you don't have a voice? So looking at your own patterns and your own areas of where you don't feel fulfilled, where you don't feel like you're being able to be creative, where you don't feel like you're being able to be in relationships that feel nurturing to you. If you can look back at your childhood, how you were raised, you might see some of those patterns, with a domination mentality that really took away your voice. And and then you can just shift that to, okay, well, what does caring for myself really look like? What does nurturing for myself really look like? And there's a lot of podcast episodes that really address that. And I do love that in every podcast I end by asking people if they have any final words of wisdom, and almost all of my guests end with that message, that it's important to love ourselves, it's important to nurture ourselves, it's important to respect ourselves and give ourselves voice, and to recognize how that entrenched domination narrative has impacted us, to take all of those positive aspects away. We're really wired to be caring. Neuroscience shows us, all sorts of science shows us. So how do we tap into that and recognize that there's this inner voice, this domination voice, that is impacting the way I relate? And I will say, just as a really fun way to explore this, Riane Eisler, the last episode of the Power of Partnership podcast that just aired or was released this past Tuesday, is on a new children's book that Riane Eisler published with a woman named Victoria Friedman and Ellen Mann. It was a team effort, and it's called Fogbusters: The Eyes of Care. And what do you think the fog is in this story? It's the domination paradigm. So who wouldn't like a children's book to help reinforce the importance of care? So Fogbusters: The Eyes of Care. It's available now, and a super beautiful book. And Diane, you are muted.
I am. I'm sorry. Okay,
No
there were
worries.
a few comments at the chat of people chiming in. Chris said Heather Cox Richardson's book, Democracy Awakening, speaks just what Cherri said, historical cycle of return to fear, violence, domination on popularity. And Renee said the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies, UPS, is an open source journal that focuses on examples of partnerships. You have some really big supporters in here. And for me, from being a new subject to me, to think of it on this big of a global level, it's what I'm really grateful for, is that you bring our attention around to you're here. Because if you don't know you're here, you can't get anywhere else. You have to know where you are to go somewhere else. And in the clarity of the recognition of that particular space of, oh my goodness, now I can go. I couldn't go because I didn't know there was a place to go, but now I know. So that was
Yeah,
really beautiful. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think in terms of that global aspect that you just touched upon, in terms of one of the biggest messages I want to share during this interview, during International Women's Day, is for us really to all recognize that, we do have some global challenges, and it is sometimes easy for us to feel like things happening around us are depressing or disheartening, and they're really out of our touch because they feel very, very global. They feel very large. They feel very societal, and it's easy for us to have somewhat of an attitude where, well, that's just, this is just how humans are. Humans are kind of wired to not get along. I mean, we're always going to have problems, and violence. It's just natural. And really, the important thing for us all to remember is that, we have power. The things don't have to be the way that sometimes we think that they have to be. Really, we've been told a story with this domination narrative that is false, and so we need to reinforce the narrative that as humans, as I shared, we are wired for caring. We are wired for connectedness and to be in relationship with each other. And so that starts in the home. It starts with our families. It expands into how we look at others, how we may stereotype people based on their gender or the way they define themselves with their gender, who they love, how they love. There's just, it's within us to make the change and to really shift to a partnership world. It's a challenge though, because we have been steeped so much in domination. So the Power Partnership podcast will give you stories from people, how they're doing it. I'm so glad that Renee put in the reference to the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Systems. That's through the University of Minnesota. As Renee said, it's open access, and it's really very creative. So it's not solely academic articles. There's artists who are submitting artwork that's based on partnership. We hope that you all really tune into the podcast, tune into the journal, go to the Center for Partnership Systems website, check out some of the resources. There's tons of resources there. Riane Eisler has spoken all over the world in all sorts of settings. So there's any topic you can imagine where you can find a YouTube video where she's being interviewed about how does domination show up? How does partnership show up? How do we make the shift? And why do we need to make the shift? We can do it. We must do it. Let's do it.
I am so grateful that you are speaking on this topic so eloquently, and my eyes have been open to a whole lot of things today. This is wonderful. And I understand you have a free gift for us.
Yes. Yeah, so the free gift is a virtual free access to the virtual Changing Our Story, Changing Our Lives self-paced course with Riane Eisler. So this is Dr. Eisler's foundational cultural transformation course. It's going to introduce a narrative about human history, about human nature, and human possibilities that will guide us to building a world that's based on caring, nature, and shared prosperity. It includes, it's wonderful. It includes 4 video lectures by Dr. Eisler, video transcripts, interactive digital workbooks, and resource guides. It's a $99 level or $99 value that you get completely for free as being a VIP participant in today's event.
That is amazing. Now, did you have that's the regular gift or the VIP gift?
That is the VIP gift.
Okay, beautiful.
Although if you know what, if it's, we'd like to get it out to as many people as possible. So if it's through the
well, it looks
process,
like
if it's showing up as a regular, let's do it. Let's leave it as a regular.
Let's do it. This is just, it's so important.
Available to all of you. Go for it.
Go for it, everyone. See if that link works. Download it right now.
Yeah, it's really a wonderful resource. It'll change your life. It's truly transformational.
Oh my goodness. It's so generous and so thorough, which is excellent. I am so grateful to have had you on. This is just it's perfect for International Women's Day. Absolutely perfect.
I do want to share one other thing in honor of International Women's Day, and that is that the podcast, we've recently partnered with the State of Women's Podcast Network, which is an impact-focused global community that is bringing educational content and podcasts created by women. So other podcasters who might be in the room, check it out. State of Women's Podcast Network. And one of the things that they're doing that is super exciting is they've created access for people with less advanced technology, like flip phones or super old cell phones, which many podcasts you can't access on these older phones. So they've created, with their technology experts, access through these phones. So it's broadening access to individuals and communities across the world who have not previously had access to podcast educational content. So definitely a very exciting way to broaden the message to an international community.
That is amazing. This has just been such a treat. And everyone, I want to welcome you to our next session coming up, which isn't here. It's in the main room. It's our keynote speaker, Tatiana. And oh my goodness, I can't wait to hear this one. And do you have any final words, Cherri, that you would like to share? I mean, you're just full of such gems.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think I've already stressed the final word that I want to make sure everyone knows is, you have the ability to shift to a partnership paradigm in all aspects of your life. The tools and resources are there for you to see how to do it and access the tools to do it, And so I wish you all the best and hope that you move forward into partnership and away from domination.
Thank you so much, Cherri. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you at the top of the hour in the main room. I'm Diane Alexander. Cheers.
Wow, that was another amazing session. We hope you enjoyed it as well. If you haven't already upgraded to VIP, now is the time. Grab all the recordings of all of the talks and VIP gifts worth thousands of dollars. For any questions or concerns, please email our support line at support@voicesofwomensummit.com. We will be back in a few moments with our next amazing speaker.